Welcome to Debt Free in 30, the show where every week we talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. I'm Doug Hoyes. Today it's time for yet another frequently asked questions show. This will be show number 2, and I'm joined today by Scott Schaefer, who is a chartered accountant and a trustee in bankruptcy with Michalos and Associates. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
One of the questions we get a lot is, who are all these players? When someone has to do a bankruptcy or a proposal, people get confused. Like, well, what's a debtor? What's a creditor? How does the trustee fall into this? How is the government involved? So let's kind of go rapid fire, piece it together, and go one by one. So who's the debtor?
The debtor is an individual that owes the money. So the person that is in financial difficulty.
Okay, so if you're listening to this show right now and you have debts, well, you're a debtor. So what's a creditor?
The creditor is a person who is owed the money to. So the person that has lent the money and is owed money back.
So a common example would be credit card company, bank, payday loan company, the government. These are taxes, all creditors, taxes, all those things are creditors. Okay, so that's what debtors are and what creditors are. A trustee. What is a trustee? What's their role in the whole insolvency process?
A trustee is the person who is appointed by the government who's been given a license to perform the duties within the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act, which means we are the guys who are able to do a bankruptcy, to administer it, to do the consumer proposals, who are licensed to complete that process.
So, just on a bit of a tangent here, but how does one get a trustee's license from the government?
It's a long process, so you have to have a background that gets you into the program. You got to have lots of experience, and you go through a program to develop your skills and knowledge in the different resources, and at the end of the day you sit an exam before the government, an oral board exam, and they decide whether to give you a license to be a trustee.
Cool. And I'm actually quite familiar with how the process works because I am actually one of the oral board of examiners and have been for a couple of years now. So in order to get a trustee's license, you typically have to have a certain amount of experience. Most trustees have university degrees. If you don't have a university or a college degree, then you have to have extended work experience, literally many years.
Absolutely.
There are many courses that you take, and there are exams at the end of those courses, and then you do a final exam, and if you complete that, then you get to sit before this oral board of examiners, which is exactly what it sounds like. There's a trustee, a lawyer, and a representative from the government in a room. You talk, and if you get the right answers, then they give you a license. So you can't get a trustee's license in 30 minutes. This is a multi-year process. The average person who has a trustee's license, it took them between probably 3 and 5 years to get that license. So once you've got that license, you are able to administer a bankruptcy or a proposal. So you're kind of the middleman in the process.
Absolutely. You're kind of like the referee. So we're the ones to make sure all the rules get followed. So we're the ones who make sure both the debtors and the creditors do what they're supposed to do throughout the process.
So walk me through it chronologically then. So someone's in financial trouble. They can get on the phone. They can call you. They can email you, whatever. You sit down. You meet with them. The first step is what?
To understand their situation. So we understand who they owe money to, what their income is, what's going on in their life, what's causing them the stress of the situation. From there, we sit down and we analyze the options. So whether somebody needs to do something for a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal, or if there's other ways of getting out of the debts through working with the banks or paying the debts, we look at all the options for them to find out what's right for that person going forward.
And what does it cost for you to figure out all these options?
Nothing. I mean, as a referee in the process, we can't be paid by the individual. So there's no cost for those meetings.
So once the proposal or the bankruptcy is filed, so let's assume that was the decision that was resulted from it, you become the trustee, and as you say, you're appointed by the government, so you actually file the paperwork with the government. They send you back something officially appointing you to administer the process. At that point, the debtor, the person who owes the money, is going to start paying money. It's putting money into the pot. Your fees come out of the money that's in the pot, and of course that's all set by the government, right?
Absolutely. It's all set, regulated.
Now, we talked about the government, so we're going through who all the different players are here in an insolvency. What role does the government have when someone goes bankrupt? And let's talk about different divisions of the government. So the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, what role do they have in the process?
They are the ones who are I like to refer to them as the legal guardians. They are the ones who ensure that everybody is following the rules within the Act, so they follow up with a trustee. The trustee is the one that reports to them. They're the ones who have the stewardship of the information, the record keeping, and the filing of all the information. The trustee is the one that handles all the paperwork and operates a game, but it's a head office that just has the paperwork at the top.
So they are the regulator. They're the ones who make sure that as the trustee, you're doing your job. And they keep a pretty close eye on you, I assume.
Absolutely. If you equate it to a hockey game, the referees are the ones who are calling the game, who are making sure everything happens. But up above, there's always somebody watching to make sure that the referees are doing their job as well.
That's where the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy comes in. And I know, having been a trustee for many, many years, they do regular monitoring. They come into our office. They review our files. But they're also doing it on a very regular basis remotely by looking at every single document that we send them, and we're sending them dozens of documents every day. Anything goes wrong, they're obviously going to pipe up and make sure that there's not an issue. So we've talked about one branch of the government, the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. What about Revenue Canada? How often do you see them involved in either a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal?
They're regularly involved because tax debts are a common thing. People have tax debts from being self-employed, from working 2 jobs, from receiving pension income and not enough taxes coming off. So Revenue Canada Canada Revenue Agency is involved in a lot of files because they are a creditor. They're owed money. That debt is because of federal law. The Bankruptcy Insolvency Act is federal law, so those two laws kind of marry up. So the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act does include income tax debts or tax-related debts because it's federal law. So they are not a unique or special creditor in that sense that they have special rights for just for the common credit card debts or income tax debts. They are very much like a credit card for income taxes.
So if you go bankrupt in a normal situation, I mean, I'm ignoring a situation where you committed some massive fraud or something, but in a normal situation, Canada Revenue Agency, debts that you owe for income taxes, for overpayments of GST or something like that, HST, those are regular unsecured debts, just like a bank loan, just like a credit card.
Absolutely.
They go away.
Yep.
Okay. So you filed all this paperwork and the bankruptcy or the proposal is up and running. It is possible that a creditor's meeting could be called. So let's talk about the case of a consumer proposal. A creditor's meeting, I guess it's exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a meeting for the creditors to do what? What happens?
To learn more information.
So they can ask questions?
Absolutely. So that in the room is the trustee, the debtor, and the creditor. Remember that the process is about both sides, understanding it, going through the process together. So the debtor has a right to get a fresh start, but the creditors have a right to understand that. So if it's a proposal, they're deciding whether they're going to accept it or not. If it is a bankruptcy, they're giving the direction to the trustee if there's things that need to be done. But if it's in a consumer proposal, a creditor's meeting is for the acceptance of that proposal. Most cases, a creditor meeting is just to discuss a counteroffer in between there. So an offer is made, the creditors want a little bit more, and most times that's actually resolved before the meeting, so nobody actually comes to the meeting.
So a creditor's meeting is really a formality. It very rarely amounts to anything because, as you say, it's already been decided in advance. And in my experience, again, over the last 25 years or so, I don't ever recall a case where a representative of a major bank or a major credit card company, or in fact any credit card company, ever physically showed up at a creditor's meeting. Have you ever had a case where one of them did?
Not for a consumer proposal, not for a general everyday situation.
It just doesn't happen. In my experience, the creditors' meetings, the most common attendee would be Canada Revenue Agency.
And absolutely. And so what they're looking for in that case is somebody owes a bunch of tax debts. Normally it's because they've been self-employed. So they're going to say, well, let's consider the offer you're making, but what's changed? How are you now not going to have a tax debt going forward? How are you going to make this good for you going forward? And we're not back at the table 3 years from now owing a bunch more tax debt. So an individual to get Revenue Canada on board when they are the majority creditor has to have a plan to ensure that they're not going to be a tax debtor going forward, that they have a plan to deal with their tax debts going forward, and then they can deal with the consumer proposal for the past debts. So it's really about the plan overall for them.
Gotcha. And as you said, in most cases, these things are going to be sorted out in advance. If we filed a consumer proposal and one of the creditors, the people you owe money to, isn't happy, which means they want more money,
Right.
then you're going to have discussions with them right away. Hey guys, what do you want? What's it going to take?
Yep.
What can the debtor afford? Everybody signs off on it. So by the time you get to the creditors meeting, yep, we've already agreed. Here, sign here. So,
And the other part too is looking at a creditors meeting. It means a majority. So the majority of the creditors have to be part of it. So one creditor by themselves generally can't make a difference. It's a majority of the dollar value. So each creditor gets one vote for every dollar they're owed in a consumer proposal.
And so very rarely does anyone ever have to show up at a creditors meeting. That's kind of what we're saying. So,
Correct.
Okay, well, those are some good answers. We got a bunch of other things we'd like to cover, but we're going to take a quick break here. This is the Frequently Asked Questions show here on Debt Free in 30. We're back on Debt Free in 30. My name's Doug Hoyes. I'm joined today by Scott Schaefer, who is a chartered accountant and a consumer proposal administrator and bankruptcy trustee with Hoyes, Michalos and Associates. Before the break here on our Frequently Asked Questions show, we were going through some of the processes, some of the players who exist in a bankruptcy or consumer proposal filing. One of the things that you have to do if you owe money and you file either a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal is attend 2 credit counseling sessions. Why is that?
Well, the laws are set up to give people a fresh start and to help them through that. So part of the helping of it is that people have a couple one-on-one meetings to talk about the future. 2 are the minimum. People could actually meet with their trustee several times if they needed to, but they're required to meet 2 times to discuss what's happened and to ensure that things can move forward, that they have a plan to rebuild credit, they have a plan to use credit wisely, kind of cover off all the things that people need to make a better and brighter future for them.
So these credit counseling sessions are for the benefit of the person who's got the debt problems.
Absolutely.
They're not designed to be some kind of punishment. It's, we want you to have a fresh start. We don't want you to get into this mess again.
Right.
So let's give you some tangible, practical things that you can do to not have this problem again.
I think sometimes the word itself is scary to people, the word counseling. It's not directly counseling, it's actually giving people some tools for themselves to move forward and get a fresh start, that they've cleared their debts, they're moving forward and making things a lot better.
So do you do these personally yourself?
Absolutely.
And are they a one-on-one session?
One-on-one. There's no group sessions at all that we do. It's purely one-on-one.
One-on-one. And so what you're trying to do is give the person you're meeting with some very practical, real-life advice then. So can you give me an example of some real-life, practical kind of advice that you've given someone in one of these credit counseling sessions?
Absolutely. So when we sit back, we look at, okay, you're now on the cash-based system. You don't have credit cards anymore. You're now moving forward with cash in hand, and what happens if something goes wrong? So it's planning for the events that could happen, the unexpected items. So everybody I like to work with is to ensure they're truly setting up emergency funds, reserve accounts, separate bank accounts that can accumulate interest and that they can set money aside so when the car breaks down, when Christmas time comes around, when the kids need something, they have an account that's available for them so they can use real cash without incurring debt. In the past, they relied on credit cards for those items. Now they don't have to worry about having credit cards. They now need to make some money for themselves. So it's kind of building up the budget so they can actually handle those things going forward.
And that's kind of the starting point for it, right? I need to know where my money goes. In a lot of cases, I get into trouble because I don't know where my money went.
And so much of it is just going to credit cards, paying this, then using that, then paying this. It's just a shuffle of paying the different credit cards that makes it hard.
And so for an emergency fund, how do you recommend people set that up then? Is it a separate bank account? Should it be an envelope with some cash under my mattress? What's the best way to do that?
I personally like having people set them up in a separate bank account, quite often, such as President's Choice Financial or a Tangerine account. Out of sight, out of mind, they put the money over there. It's a bank that they can transfer money to. They have access to it through either CIBC or Scotiabank or any of the credit or any of the bank machines. But it's a separate account that's used for just that. People can keep it at the same bank as a savings account, but they see it every single day. It becomes so available for them. So I always like to say, put it at a safe spot where there's no service fees, grows with interest a little bit, but you know that money's available to you.
And so you mentioned a couple of different banks there. Do you get a kickback or any kind of commission from any of those
No,
banks? Are you associated with any of those banks?
Not at all. What I like about them is there's no bank fees.
So that's what it comes down to. There's no service charges, so therefore you can put your money there. You're not gonna lose $5 every month of what you're putting away.
Because part of it in life is reducing our costs, not spending any extra money than we have to. Paying a larger service fee to hold your money doesn't make a lot of sense.
Doesn't make sense. Unless you absolutely need the extra service, then why would you? And let's face it, everything's electronic these days.
Absolutely.
Most of us get our paycheck deposited electronically. We pay all our bills online. So using a bank like that, a virtual bank, as it were, is a good way to do it.
Any savings account at any bank will work. But the key is to know that money's set aside for special items. It's not meant for everyday spending, not meant for just anything else. It's truly meant for those other accounts, for other items.
And so would you recommend then that if I get paid every week, I put a little bit of money every week into one of those accounts?
Absolutely. It's the old principle, pay yourself first. A little bit of every paycheck should go into that. Sometimes it's a bigger chunk, sometimes it's a small chunk, but the key is that it is one of the bills you pay. You pay yourself into that savings account.
And these are the kind of things you would talk about one-on-one with someone in a credit counseling session then?
Absolutely.
And the people you're meeting with, you've already met with them before, probably on multiple occasions.
Correct.
You're already familiar with their budget because as part of the bankruptcy or consumer proposal process, they have to prepare a budget.
Correct.
And so are you following up then with them? Okay, so here's what your budget looked like at the start. Where are we at now? What changes have you made? Is it a process that evolves?
Absolutely. And most times they tell me. Most times when we sit down and talk, people tell me the first meetings are within the first 2 months. The next ones depends on when we want to have it, anywhere from 30 days to 4 months later. So we have some time to do these meetings. The key is it's right for that person. So we're sit down and say, okay, you're 2 months into it. How are you doing? What's going on with the budget? It's amazing what difference happens by the time we meet the second time. So each person will tell me how they're doing with their budget, whether they're still paycheck to paycheck, whether they're, actually getting some money set aside, whether they're moving forward. Because when they come out of the process, they need to be ready to be totally debt-free and living on the cash-based system so that they can rebuild strongly.
And this whole thing about the cash-based system, everyone gets scared. Well, how am I going to be doing that? I've been, robbing Peter to pay Paul. I've got to have multiple credit cards because I can't survive. I think people kind of forget that, well, wait a minute. Once you do a proposal, your debts are wiped out. You're not paying those credit cards. You're not paying the bank loans, the lines of credit. You're making one payment in your proposal and that's it. Yep. And if we've done it correctly, if it makes sense, then your cash cost each month has gone down. Instead of trying to make $1,000 a month in minimum payments on all your different debts, we do a proposal where you're paying $400 or $500. There should be some extra cash there, and that's what becomes the savings plan.
Absolutely. And when they're done the process, convert that into a RSP or an RESP for the kids or anything else. When you're done, what you've been paying in a bankruptcy or a proposal should now be money that you put toward yourself. That you're debt-free, you're done a bankruptcy, you're done the proposal, you're discharged, you're released from it, you're clear. You've been paying that amount every month. Make it something good for yourself. Put it into an RESP. Put it into a tax-free savings account. Make it so that there's something benefit for yourself.
Well, and so you talk about benefits. So is there life after bankruptcy? Is there life after you do a consumer proposal?
Absolutely. Everything's about rebuilding and starting over. The banks make so much money on interests. They will allow people to finance things again. To get mortgages, most times the banks want somebody to be discharged for 2 years. So the time they start, they get released either 9 months or 21 months. There's a difference there. But 2 years after that period of time is when the banks start looking at them again for a mortgage. So people, if they're able to save up and rebuild, then they're able to gain mortgages, to gain car loans and that kind of stuff.
But the key is I have to be able to save up.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to go bankrupt, finish my bankruptcy, and go buy a big house with no money down. It doesn't work like that.
And the biggest part is going back to this cash. When people have been paying with cash, they're now very aware of how much the money they have. So to go out there and get a loan, well, they know, okay, if I haven't been able to save up that $400 a month for a loan, and now I take out a car loan, how am I going to pay it if I didn't have my budget in the first place?
And that's a very good point, that paying with cash is emotionally a lot different than paying with a credit card. Paying with a debit card and seeing the money come right out of your bank account immediately is a lot different than, okay, I can pay for it at the end of the month. I think that really forces you to be very careful with your money, make sure that you're not overspending.
There's proven studies out there that show that we spend more money when we charge something than when we do with cash. I'm already buying this other stuff. I might as well just put it on a credit card and not worry about it. Where if you got physical cash in hand or you're using your debit card, you only buy exactly what you want.
Yeah, you can't spend it then.
You don't overspend. I mean, credit cards are a massive incentive to overspend, and credit card companies know that.
And so the answer to the question, is there life after bankruptcy? Well, yes, there is, but it starts with you.
Correct.
You've got to have a savings plan. You've got to keep close track of your expenses, and that's how you can recover.
And the other part is when I always say to people, before they start the process, where would they be a year, 2 years, 3 years from now if they kept paying the minimums that they're paying now? Would they be in a better or worse position? Most people say they'd be in no better position. If not, they'd be in a worse position with interest. So it allows them to deal with their debts to clear it out so that they then can have a fresh start, where if they kept going at the cycle they're going now, owing $50,000 in credit cards or whatever it is, they're not going to be in any better position down the road.
And that's really the whole point of a fresh start. So
Correct.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that. Thanks for joining me, Scott. That was Frequently Asked Questions here on Debt Free in 30. We'll be right back to wrap it up. Welcome back. It's time for the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. My guest today was Scott Schaefer, and we started by reviewing the role played by all of the people involved in the insolvency process. Scott also talked about creditors' meetings, and he gave us some examples of practical tips he gives people during credit counseling sessions. That's the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. I don't have time today to review every item Scott and I discussed, so I'll comment on just one of his points. Scott explained that the role of the trustee is as a referee, a middleman. The trustee's job is to ensure that everyone plays by the rules. This is a key point because I occasionally hear advertising that says, "Don't go talk to a trustee, they work for the creditors." That's simply not true. Scott doesn't get hired by the people you owe money to. You walk into his office and ask for help, he helps you and he work together to come up with a plan and get the process started before he ever speaks to one of your creditors. So, does that mean he's working for you? No, he's the referee, so his job is to make sure both you and the creditors follow the rules so that the process is fair to everyone. It's a win-win situation. That's our show for today. Full show notes with links to everything we talked about today are available on our website at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.